give us an overview of Singapore's startup ecosystem as well as the Global Innovation Alliance. Thank you.
Right, thanks. Thanks, Jojo. It's great to be here. First and foremost, I want to thank Plug and Play for inviting me. I think Keynote is a too strong a word. I'm really here to share with you a little bit about what we do and essentially to try and find opportunities that we can work with you as well. Maybe by a quick show of hands, how many of you are not from Singapore, are not based here? Okay. How many of you, this is your first time to Singapore? Okay. Okay. So I think most of you are quite familiar with Singapore. So maybe let me quickly talk a little bit about who we are. And then I wanted to share with you a little bit about what we do, what Enterprise Singapore, what we do in the startup ecosystem. And then through that, maybe we can find ways that we can work with you. Okay? So essentially, some of you may know that there are a couple of agencies that you may come across. I think for most of our overseas guests, you may have heard of the Economic Development Board. So it's a sister agency of the Enterprise Singapore. So the two agencies, we work hand in hand to help grow the startup ecosystem, as well as to work with corporates like yourself in many areas. And where ESG comes in is to see how we can work with you in terms of more corporate innovation, open innovation activities, which I will elaborate a little bit more. Very quickly, on Enterprise Singapore, we are really the champion agency in terms of growing local enterprises, and that starts from startups all the way to the big local enterprises. We have 35, and we'll soon have 36 offices all over the world. Essentially, what we do is that we help our local companies to go overseas, to help them to grow. But at the same time, these officers will be a conduit to work with you should you have any questions about wanting to work with local companies. I wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk about innovation. You know, Singapore, we are trying to move towards a more innovation-driven economy. So what do I mean by that? We think that a lot of the things that we do today help Singapore to be where we are, and we do not want to stop there. We want to see how we can embrace innovation in a lot more ways. So how do you do that? Now, everybody knows that startup is a very strong innovation engine. You see many of the startups here. I was told that there are more than 40 startups that are exhibiting here. So for us, I will tell you a bit about what we do in the startup ecosystem, but very quickly, essentially, we are trying to bridge the startups to the corporates. And how do we do that? Later on, I'll share more details with you. The other piece of work that we are doing is to help some of our local enterprises to embark on the innovation journey. We do it many ways. Some of the ways that we do with them could also be quite relevant for some of the corporates here. And again, we are quite keen to see how we can work with you to take this journey, whether you're doing that in Singapore or in the region. Last but not least, the government in Singapore, we spend a lot of money. For the last 5 years, we spent almost 19 Singapore billion dollars worth of money into R&D. And obviously, we want to try and see how we can commercialize more of those money that we have spent into R&D. So we look at it from both a push and a pull way to get our and maximize the money that we have spent into R&D. Right, market-led innovation. This, I think, would resonate very well with what Plug and Play is doing here. Essentially, I mean, if you look at it, most companies, how they do R&D, for many years, they do it in-house. And I think that's the model that most people are very familiar with. But in the day and age of today, I think a lot of companies are really embracing open innovation. That is, again, an area that we want to talk to you more about. Open innovation can come in many shapes and sizes. Some companies, they start to have corporate incubation, corporate venture activities. Some work with us to find ways to reach out to the startup ecosystem. Some work with us to invest into startups. Some work with us to identify problem statements so that they can then use the startups and the other companies to help them to solve some of their pain points, look at new technologies, solutions that today may not be known to them. So those are activities that we will be quite keen to partner with you, maybe working very closely with Plug and Play. And not to mention that we have also many activities that we do with some corporates with regards to co-innovation. We bring a couple of our startups or some of our tech SMEs to work alongside some of our corporates to enable a new product or new services offering to be materialized. So really the spectrum is there, and we want to find opportunities to work with you. Very quickly on the startup ecosystem that I mentioned. Today there are roughly about 4,000 tech startups in Singapore. We want to welcome more tech startups to come and join us in the growth of the region. If you look at it, this region, we are probably at an inflection point. I think Southeast Asia will be a very strong region. You all know the stats, 650 million population, rising middle class, population that's getting more internet savvy. And we think there are many, many untapped opportunities in this region. And I always say thanks to the what Mr. Trump is doing in the US, thanks but no thanks, but a lot of the work that most companies are facing, the challenges, they see Southeast Asia as a good area and a region where the growth is still there. It is very close to many companies that we're seeing from China coming down. And again, we're seeing a lot of European companies, startups coming to our part of the world to capture some of these growth opportunities. We obviously, Enterprise Singapore, we do not work alone. We have many partners like Plug and Play. And today we have about 100 or so incubator accelerators, about 150 VCs. And so we at Enterprise Singapore work very closely with all these partners to grow the ecosystem. We look at areas from talent to financing to infrastructure, some of which I will share a little bit more in the next couple of slides, just to give you a flavor of the work that we do. We believe that for us, a lot of the startups that comes to Singapore or we want to grow out of Singapore are in the deep tech areas. This is an area that Enterprise Singapore we are focusing on. We as a government agency, we try not to look at areas that there is no market failure, so to speak. If the market is operating very well, we should let the market do its work. But in some of the areas where we think could be because of the risk involved, or could be because of certain regulatory hurdles that companies may face, I think that is where we want to come in, or tough areas, I call them. And deep tech is one of the areas that we want to put a lot more energy into, to grow more startups, to encourage more entrepreneurs to take on that journey, to attract more foreign startups to come and be part of our community. We have a couple of programs, like I mentioned earlier, that help foreign startups to come to Singapore, one of which is called Entrepass. So basically, it's an entrepreneurship visa. And my team, actually, we process this visa. So although for entrepreneur, you apply it through our Ministry of Manpower, but essentially it gets routed to us, and we process this. So essentially, it helps you to land in Singapore. And for the first year, actually, you do not need to do anything. We look at your track record. You can see some of the criteria that we look at. And then there will be a 1-year free look, so to speak, for you to get started in Singapore. Infrastructure is another area that we do. I think for some of you, you may have seen a couple of the infrastructure that we put in place called a Launchpad at One North. Today we have 2. We think we want to do a couple more. But let me give you an idea of what it means. So at One North, for some of you that have visited this place, there are today about 8 buildings. We started with 1, and along the way, we took over a couple more. So today there are 8 buildings, 800 startups, about 50 of our incubator accelerators, our corporates, our VCs are actually housed there. So it's a very packed community. And the whole idea is that we want to grow a community that will help the startups to thrive, but at the same time to allow them to find partnership opportunities with the corporates, with the VCs, with the incubator accelerators helping them. So that's what we want to try to do. We want to replicate that more all over the island. We have a couple of events that we organize as well. Let me just quickly touch on one that Jojo mentioned, where we announced our partnership with Plug and Play, and that is called the Singapore FinTech Festival and Switch. That happened 2 weeks ago. we had more than 60,000 participants. Some of you may have visited us, about 1,000 exhibitors. We had 41 country international pavilions, so to speak. And we had also quite a huge pool of speakers. And it is just a platform for partners to showcase the technologies, for people to be connected, for us to be able to share and bring the right content to bear. And this we thought was quite successful, and it helped us in this small step of journey as Singapore takes towards being an innovation hub. We also have, as part of the Singapore FinTech Festival and Switch, we have this startup competition called Slingshot, and Slingshot has been growing from strength to strength. This year we had 2,400 applications from over 120 countries. You can see there that yes, there's more than $2 million worth of prizes that we have given out, and it is an opportunity for a lot of startups that come for the startup competition are not. Most of them are actually post-Series A. They have a product, and what they want is that they found that this was a good platform for them to meet investors, but more importantly, to meet corporates. We have 200 judges, 90 of them are corporates. So it provides an opportunity for them to meet and then be able to then hopefully find a business opportunity as well as obviously fundraising we've provided by this platform. Okay, let me end off by talking about the Global Innovation Alliance, which is something that we announced back in 2017. Today we have 13 cities that we have a connection to. So for each of the city, what we're trying to do is to work with a partner that has a very strong link to that city, and obviously strong link in Singapore. And in Jakarta, we found that partner with Plug and Play. And in each of these cities, what we want to do is to connect to that city so that startups from Singapore can access that city and startups from that city can access Singapore. And over time, within this network, we hope that startups can then find synergies. So a couple of ideas that we are trying to do would be to look for, say, a problem. Maybe the problem could be in Singapore. Maybe a healthcare system in Singapore require people to identify solutions to solve. And then through this network that you participate with us, we can then help to find some of these solutions. And we can bring all the so-called the synergies of the network to bear. But essentially, we also hope that through this, our own startups can tap onto opportunities in those cities. So hopefully a win-win situation between Singapore and those cities. And we will continue to grow this. And hopefully that over time, we would like to invite some of our corporates to join us as well. Some of the corporates could be so that they can then participate and access some of the good stuff that we have. And to that, I really want to thank Plug and Play, because I think because of their strong network, that's why we have chosen them for Jakarta. But hopefully with that, we can also tap onto Plug and Play's other networks, as well as our partners' other networks. So really, that's the end of my short sharing here.